Welcome into week 3 of Run the League. Let's check out the waiver wire to see how you can help your team during week 3 of the NFL season. Let's do it. What's going on, guys, and welcome in to the third week of Run the League. Of course, it's becoming a habit all season long, waiver wire. Absolutely one of the most important things you can do throughout the season. So we're going to talk about a few additions during week 3 that could help your team going forward. Of course, hopefully you're doing pretty well and don't have to rely on the waiver wire as things are going to dry up a little bit throughout the week. So I'm going to talk about a few names off the waiver wire for each position. And I also might talk a little bit about a couple storylines from week 2 of the season that maybe can help you plan going forward. But to start the week off, let's talk about some waiver wire ads. So we'll start with the running back position, like we always do, most important position in fantasy football. And I have a few names that are very intriguing this week. We got some news, I think, in week 2 of the NFL season that really changed some narratives going forward. So the first one, J.D. Mckissick, the running back for the Washington football team. He has a role, and I think that's something that we didn't know in week 1. We thought Antonio Gibson, oh, man, he got this huge snap share. It's his backfield. He's finally going to get the receiver work that he needs to really ascend to being a top 10 running back. That did not happen this week, and this was the first week with Tyler Heinicke as the quarterback. Ryan Fitzpatrick, of course, out for a while, probably indefinitely, to be honest with you. It's going to be a while with his hip injury that he had. So I think it's J.D. McKissick's season a little bit. Now, obviously, Gibson is the running back to own, but McKissick is on the waiver wire, and he's a guy, especially in PPR leagues, that I'm very interested in. I think he could have a lot of value. Next name on the list, and this is especially geared towards Ezekiel Elliott owners. If you have Zeke on your team, you need to figure out a way to get Tony Pollard on your team. And the simple fact of the matter is Tony Pollard just had 13 carries for 109 yards to go along with 3 receptions for 31 yards. This guy looked really good. He looked faster than Zeke, more explosive than Zeke. I think there's a real problem here, and I'm not going to say that it's going to be his backfield, but I do think after this week, he's definitely going to dip into Zeke's production a little bit. So if you have Zeke, you need to spend up to get Tony Pollard if he is available on the waiver wire. If he's not, try to trade for him. He's a guy that I do think that you need on your roster. If you own Tony Pollard but not Zeke, oh, this is the perfect chance to sell high. So it's kind of a mixed bag of information I'm trying to give you, but it's just he's a very valuable player right now after the week that he just had. Next name to know, and I think this is probably going to be the most popular waiver wire ad for the week, if I were to guess. Just kind of depending on your league, but he's a guy who's not owned in a lot of leagues, and so therefore I think he's going to be kind of heavily targeted, and that's Corduroy Patterson, the running back / wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. He has dual position availability, so he can be running back or wide receiver. I don't really know how that works because he's usually lined up as a running back, but good for him. He can play both positions. That you're allowed to plug him into both. But 2 touchdowns and 5 receptions are the 2 areas that I need to point out. And really, it's also because Mike Davis looks just terrible. And I mentioned I was kind of staying away from Mike Davis this season. Just, he's a journeyman running back, a guy who really has not had a ton of success throughout his career. And now you're just expecting him to go to Atlanta and be just some sort of workhorse, awesome running back in an offense that's going to have to throw the ball a ton because they're going to be losing a lot. Just not a good recipe for success. And so therefore, I think Corduroy Patterson is a guy who I think you need to look at and say, okay, do you believe that the Falcons are going to be trailing a lot? I do. Secondly, do you believe that he's going to eat into Mike Davis's workload because he just simply looks better? I do. And if those 2 questions are yes for y'all as well, then I think he's a guy you got to add because he could be the running back 1 in Atlanta, and it really wouldn't surprise me. So be on the lookout for him. I have 3 other names that just kind of pay attention to. I know that most of these guys are owned kind of throughout leagues, but if they are on the waiver wire, just pay attention. James White, running back for the Patriots. He's just cemented into a workload, and anytime they're losing, he's going to be a great fantasy option because he'll catch probably 5 or 6 passes. He gives you that safe 10-point floor that you're looking for in PPR. Kenny Gainwell, just again, he continues to have a role in the Eagles offense. And then Alexander Madison, who his is really contingent on Dalvin Cook. But the simple fact of the matter is Dalvin Cook's a guy that's getting 20-plus touches a game. If he were to miss time, then Alexander Madison becomes very, very valuable. Could be a league winner type if Dalvin missed an extended amount of time. And Dalvin was already limping after week 2 of the NFL season, so definitely something to pay attention to. Moving on to the wide receiver position, I have 2 names that are kind of tied at the top, and that's Sterling Shepard and Rondale Moore. So Sterling Shepard, PPR machine right now. 9 and 10 targets in the first 2 weeks of the season, at least 94 yards. Also caught a touchdown in the first week. So he's very interesting, and I think he should be a guy that everyone needs to go out and add. He is Daniel Jones' kind of safety blanket. My only issue with him is that we haven't seen Kenny Golladay really ascend yet, and I do think that's coming. I think he'll be better than he has been in the first 2 weeks. I think he'll catch some touchdowns, be a factor in that area. Evan Ingram is coming back, the tight end, who I'm going to talk about at the tight end position, but he'll be back, so there's some more targets that are getting dispersed a little bit. And then what happens when Saquon is healthy? All of those are very big question marks I have, but at this point, I think you have to go with the information available, and that information is that Daniel Jones loves to throw the ball to Sterling Shepard at this point in the season, so he's my number 1 simply for that reason, but I have a lot of question marks still about kind of his trajectory for the rest of the year. The other guy that I mentioned, Rondale Moore, the wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. So I mentioned last week that he had 20 snaps and was targeted 5 times. So on a fourth of his times he was just out on the field, he was targeted. That's incredible. And so I think that translated to this week. He was okay week 1, but I mean, he was extraordinary in week 2. 7 receptions for 114 yards. And he also scored a touchdown on a bomb, 70-plus yard touchdown. But he's just heavily involved in the offense. I think kind of something that I've noted from week 1 is just the simple fact that the Cardinals offense is going to be great this year. Kyler's got a shot to be the MVP of this league, and Rondale Moore is going to have success here. And I think Christian Kirk will have success. We saw A.J. Green have success, and of course DeAndre Hopkins. But there's a lot of mouths to feed. But I think Rondale Moore is the guy you have to be excited about because the team spent draft capital on him. He's a rookie, a guy who's still getting kind of used to the NFL, and he's already having a big impact. So very fun to watch, a fun player to watch, which is also exciting, but also a guy who I think could end up being the wide receiver 2 in Arizona, and that is extremely valuable moving forward in the rest of the season. Another name to look at is KJ Osborne, the wide receiver for the Vikings. I mean, simply put, 5 or more catches for 75-plus yards the first 2 weeks of the year. Everyone thought this was going to be the Thielen and Jefferson show, which truthfully it has been. But KJ Osborne is kind of proving that there can be a third target in this offense, especially with Irv Smith done for the year. I think he's an interesting one, and I would definitely look to add him if you have some question marks at wide receiver, or, if you just kind of are looking at your wide receiver position saying, hey, maybe I can drop, a guy like KJ Hamler or something along those lines. I think KJ Osborne is probably a better option moving forward. 3 other names, again, just make sure they're not on the waiver wire because these are 3 guys I would have ahead of the other guys, and that's Mike Williams, who is he's a beast, and they're finally using him the right way. And at 26 years old, yeah, this is a late breakout, but it's pretty crazy because he's the same age as Calvin Ridley, which no one would think that. But yeah, same age, a guy who's just breaking out a little bit later in his career, and he's getting tons of targets. That guy, I truthfully think he's going to be a wide receiver, a top 20 wide receiver the rest of the season. 2 other names, Michael Pittman and Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick, Denver Broncos. He scored a touchdown the first 2 weeks of the year. No Jerry Jeudy, kind of makes sense. Michael Pittman, on the other hand, he had his breakout game. 120-plus yards receiving. looked really good, looked like the alpha, the wide receiver one in Indiana. The problem is that Carson Wentz got hurt again, sprained both ankles. I don't know how it's possible, but the guy just continues to get hurt, and spraining both ankles on the same play is pretty remarkable. And so he's going to be out. Don't know how long, but if it is a high ankle sprain, which is what it looks like when Aaron Donald kind of rolled up on his ankle, I mean, if it's severe, that's a 6-week injury, most likely. If it's not severe, hopefully he's only out maybe a week or two. But my issue with Pittman is if Jacob Eason is the quarterback, he's hard to own. But if Wentz is only going to miss a week, or if Wentz plays this week, then Michael Pittman is a guy you definitely need to add to your roster. I know he's pretty much owned in most leagues, but if you can find him, I think he'd be a great add. Moving on to the quarterback position, I like to do quarterback a little bit differently because obviously some people stream the quarterback position. So my streams this week at the quarterback spot are Sam Darnold versus the Texans, Kirk Cousins versus Seattle, and Daniel Jones versus the Falcons. All three of those guys I think are pretty good adds if you need some help at the quarterback position just for this week. So if you can add those guys off the waiver wire, might be pretty good additions. Outside of those guys, some names to watch kind of for the entire season. Teddy Bridgewater, I think he's actually a pretty good add. He's a top 12 quarterback right now, so he's kind of teetering depending on the size of your league. He's a must-own in 12-team leagues, and then he's kind of a, if you're in a 10-team league, I mean, he's been pretty good this year, and the Broncos haven't been able to run the football, so it kind of makes sense that he could be a pretty good add. Plus, he plays the Jets this week. So if you really need help at quarterback, I think he's a very good option to add. Derek Carr, he's a top 10 QB right now, and the two teams he's played are the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. You're not going to face tougher defenses for the most part than those two, and he went in there and played really, really well in both games. He does have bad matchups coming up, but at this point, I think you kind of have to view him as kind of matchup proof. I'm not saying that he's going to be a top 10 QB the whole year, but I do think he's a very serviceable backup quarterback on your roster. He does have Miami, the Chargers, the Bears, Denver, and Philadelphia coming up before his bye week. That's where you kind of are. That's where the struggle is. But on the flip side, you have proof that he can do it against tough matchups, which is very intriguing to me. The final name is actually my top add this week at the quarterback position, and it's for upside. And hopefully you drafted him during the offseason. Hopefully he was a guy who was on your radar at the back end of drafts to be maybe your quarterback 2 or quarterback 3 with upside, and that's Justin Fields. Now, he did not look good this past week. There's no way to sugarcoat that. When Andy Dalton got hurt, he was pretty much a non-factor and looked worse than Andy Dalton, to be honest. But I think he is a guy who's going to continue to get better. He's a rookie. And if he's able to get the start this week because Andy Dalton is banged up, might not play, then Fields is a very intriguing option going forward throughout the season, has the upside to be a top 10 guy. So definitely pay attention to Justin Fields if he is on the waiver wire. And then the tight end spot. Guys, just to be honest with you, this has been a really tough year if you're trying to stream tight ends so far. It's been a complete guessing game. I feel like the tight ends who aren't at the top have really struggled. And therefore, if you didn't take one of the top tight ends, you're probably struggling right now at the position. So we're going to go a little deeper here. We're going to try to find some upside guys. And so the first one, Evan Ingram, I mentioned, I think he'll be back for the Giants this week. If it's not this week, it should be in the near future. But if he is playing, he gets Atlanta this week. The Falcons are a great matchup, and you get an opportunity to just see what Evan Ingram has, what he could be. We saw during his rookie season how explosive he could be, but injuries and just honestly inconsistency on the field have been huge issues, but maybe he turns it around and you end up with a guy who has high upside, and that's what you're trying to find here. The other guy I really like, I mentioned him last week. Unfortunately, he didn't come through for you, and that's Jared Cook. But if you watch the game for the Chargers, he caught a touchdown pass that was inexplicably called back. I have the call was absolutely terrible. Cook caught a touchdown. That should have been 7 more points to his total, which would have made him, pushed him inside the top 7 at the tight end position. So again, I think Jared Cook is a steady option, especially in the passing game, and especially in a matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, which is who he's playing this week. So that wraps up the waiver wire guys who I'm looking to add. But let's talk about a few storylines that I took away from week 2 of the NFL season. So the first one, Arizona Cardinals offense. I am so just thrilled with what I'm seeing from this offense. They're spreading the football around. Kyler Murray looks incredible. The running game looks pretty good. James Conner, Chase Edmonds, both have been fairly serviceable. Edmonds more than Conner so far, but I will say I think in games where the Cardinals are winning, I think Conner could have a pretty nice role and score some touchdowns, but in most games I do think Edmonds is the guy to own. But again, AJ Green, he looks better than he did all year last year. Christian Kirk looking like a reemergence from 2 years ago. Rondale Moore, very, very good prospect, continue to just show what he has and what he can bring to an NFL roster. Just tons of talent there. And, of course, DeAndre Hopkins. How can you forget about him? So, point of this, try to own as many Arizona Cardinal players as possible, and especially Kyler Murray. That guy, I mean, he's just so reliable, and he looks so good to start the year. So, yeah, that was my first takeaway. The next one, Packers, Monday Night Football. They got it right. Kind of what I thought would happen, what most people thought would happen against the Detroit Lions. That's just a get-right game, and they absolutely got right. And they looked really good. Aaron Rodgers, 4 touchdown passes. Aaron Jones, 4 touchdowns. Devontae Adams, over 100 yards receiving. They all looked really good. Even Tunyon caught a touchdown. So I think you got to be pretty happy with what you saw. Flip side, they played Detroit. Detroit's probably the worst defense in the entire NFL, so we'll see how that translates going forward. But I have a lot more confidence in the Packers now than I did after week 1 when they looked so terrible. The next news note, the Saints, very concerned. Against the Panthers are a pretty good defense. I'm a pretty big believer in Matt Rule. I do think that they're continuing to play really well. Should be 3-0 after this week. They play the Texans. So I think they're a solid team. But the Saints, I mean, this is what can happen when Jameis Winston struggles. And he struggled mightily against the Panthers, and it hurt the entire offense. He wasn't checking down to Alvin Kamara. He wasn't making proper reads. He wasn't getting first downs. It just was a nightmare. And so I think my takeaway from this is not, okay, Alvin Kamara is done or Jameis is done. My takeaway is this is in the realm of possibility. And that is not what you want in fantasy football, where you can look over and say, okay, Alvin Kamara is going to have less than 40 yards of total offense. You don't want that to be in the realm of possibility. You want it to be, okay, his floor is maybe 60 yards with 4 catches, which gives you 10 points, and then you're happy. But that did not happen. And so very concerned about the Saints. It looks like they do need Michael Thomas back, which is really not surprising. But they need a few more options, or they need these wide receivers to step up. But they got to figure out a way to get Alvin Kamara the football, and they got to figure out a way to allow Jameis to be more successful like he was in week 1 of the season. My final storyline of the week, 49ers backfield. My goodness. I think where I'm at right now is Elijah Mitchell. He seems to be the lead back. Trey Sermon, hurt, had a concussion, might play this week. We'll see. JaMychal Hasty seems like he's going to be out for a couple weeks with I believe an ankle sprain is what's going on with Hasty. They went and added Kerryon Johnson. I think they had a tryout, might add 2 more running backs to the roster. It's just a really tough situation to be in. So my takeaway is if you have an IR spot, add Jeff Wilson now, immediately. He'll be back in a few weeks. I think he's got 3 more weeks where he'll be out. Add him because he could come back and be the lead back. Secondly, right now, it's Elijah Mitchell's backfield, it seems. And thirdly, don't drop Trey Sermon yet. I know it was terrible. I know it continues to be terrible and horribly frustrating. As someone who does have at least 1 share of Trey Sermon in my main league, it's very frustrating to see what has happened to him and kind of how Kyle Shanahan has used him. But on the flip side, I think there is still upside there. And so don't drop him yet. See what happens. Hopefully he's able to play this week and show a little bit more. But yeah, it's just a very concerning situation in the 49ers backfield. So for the waiver wire and a few storylines, this has been Run the League on 365 Sports.